Hi, in this video we will be ranking all 35 Cuphead bosses from easiest to hardest, as well as those in the DLC. Now please note that all of the rankings in this video are our opinions. If you disagree with some of these opinions, then you should try making your own ranking video. We also will be including all of King Dust's minions as our own boss, and we won't be ranking any of the bosses in the King's Gauntlet. Now with all that said, let's begin the ranking. At number 35, we have Mangosteen. With this boss, all of his attacks are very simple and easy to understand on your first fight with him. And it's honestly just a very short boss, and I usually always come out of it without getting hit even once. And not to mention, this guy is one of the final tiles you must complete before fighting King Dust himself, which makes this boss all the more easier as you're already warmed up from all the mini-bosses from before. At number 34, we have another one of King Dust's mini-bosses, Cuphead. Now this guy is very easy, and if you're playing with Mr. Chalice or simply using a smoke bomb, he becomes even easier. His only attack is splitting into separate chips, which then move slowly across the screen in random order. Now understandably, he is on the second tile of King Dust's mini-bosses, which means he won't be that hard regardless. At number 33, we have Pip and Dot. Now these guys are quite simple if you know how to jump and can predict what their next moves are. All that they do are either spit out a 20-sided die or send out a flying bird. Both of these are easy to avoid, but I mainly mess up from the tiles that are moving along the floor as I find it difficult to make the jump in such a small space. Number 32, we finally have a normal boss fight, being one of the first ones you tackle. That is of course the root pack. For the first phase, you fight a potato that shoots out dirt as well as perishable worms in a basic pattern. After defeating him, Ollie Bulb will grow out of the ground and start shedding tears. All you need to do is move out of the way and keep shooting him. Once he's dead, he will dig himself underground and then the carrot will pop out in the background. This phase, in my opinion, is the hardest of the 3 phases. All that he does, however, is shoot carrot projectiles at you that will track you down unless you shoot them. On top of that, he also shoots out laser beams from his third eye. All that being said and done, there's still a secret phase. If you don't shoot Ollie Bulb from the second phase, he won't attack you, but instead you get a harder final phase with a radish chasing you down, which provides more of a challenge in the final phase. At number 31, we have Fear Lap, which is one of King Dust's mini-bosses that are fought in a plane. He shoots out presents that later shoot out horseshoes in the shape of a circle. The main challenge, however, is the foreground, as I often can't see past her and get hit by the horseshoes. There are also little ghosts at the bottom which can shoot up if they're a light blue colour, but they're not really that much of a challenge. Number 30, we have Mr. Wheezy, who can pop up on either side of the screen and will blow fireballs which are easy to avoid, and the challenge comes from hopping left or right while the cigars rise up in the middle. Number 29, we have the Tipsy Troop, which are quite tricky when you fight them all at once, but on their own they are very easy. The short one spills everything, making the floor hazardous, and the wine shoots up olives which then shoot out their eyes that follow you around, and the tall one sprays liquids from top to the bottom right above you. Number 28, we have Pirouetta. The goal of it is to constantly parry the chips at the top to serve as platforms for you to jump over her with. She also shoots out little spheres which serve little to no challenge. The entire fight is made a snore fest if you use Miss Chalice or the smoke bomb, as you can just go right through her legs. 27, we have Hocus Pocus, which is a magic rabbit that has 2 attacks. 1. Rabbit skulls circle you as you'll need to jump through the opening when they begin to close on you. The second attack is little water droplets falling onto you. Some are parryable, and those ones that are these things you want to parry to create an opening for you to squeeze through. 26, we have Mr. Challenge, which is the hardest one of King Dust's mini-bosses in my opinion. The whole thing is a memory game, which I find quite tricky. Once you match up a set of cards, then you can attack them. Number 25, we have King Dust himself. The whole battle consists of you parrying the pink cards and then landing to repeat it again. He himself isn't that hard, but of course the challenge comes from beating all mini-bosses beforehand and how much HP you can save up till the final phase. 24, we have Goopy Legrande, which is a blue blob that bounces around. That's all, until the second phase where he grows bigger and is slightly harder than when he was small. Then he turns into a gravestone, which then slams onto you. This phase, just like the others, are very, very easy. Number 23, we have Cagney Carnation, who just spits out seeds and stretches his face a bit. On the final phase, his vines cover the ground as plants grow to consume some of the platforms above it to hurt you. 22, we have Ribby and Croaks, who shoot out fireflies and fiery fists. This isn't too tricky, but the second phase is slightly harder, when Ribby shoots planets out from his fists, whilst Croak blows on you to push you back. The final phase is where things get real, however. They turn into a slot machine which can give 1 of 3 attacks each time you parry the fist. That includes the snake, which is just several circles you jump on. The bull, which shoots out circles that fire lasers from top or bottom. The final attack is the tiger, which I believe is the hardest one of the three, which are just bulls bouncing up and down. 21, we have Hildeberg, who just sends out blimps that shoot little projectiles at you. She also turns into different star signs. All of these are relatively tricky, but the final phase is the hardest for sure. She turns into the moon, which shoots stars and UFOs onto you. This boss took me tons of tries to beat, but I believe she's so much easier now because I have lots of practice with her. And number 20, we have Sally Stageplay. Her first phase has her throwing these weird fan things on the ground that hurt you if you touch them while she jumps all over the place. The second phase has her summon toy mice from her umbrella whilst babies throw bottles down at you. The third phase has her become a god while she summons different kinds of weather like lightning, meteors, waves, etc. After that, you will go on to the final phase where she's an angel who just floats at the top of the screen whilst her umbrella is moving left and right trying to follow you. On top of this, roses occasionally fall down. With all that being said, the final phase is still probably the easiest of the 4 phases, but there's still a secret phase. If you stand on both angel babies in the first phase, her husband dies in the background and she proceeds to cry over his dead body. On the second phase, instead of babies throwing bottles, nuns throw crosses. On the third phase, her husband comes back alive as a god trying to kill you. The final phase is about the same, but the background's slightly different, which makes you believe that this is the saddest boss fight in the entire game. 19, we have the secret devil boss, which is just one long phase. The main difficulty comes from the odd way you fight the boss. It's pretty hard to explain, but I'm sure you'll agree that it did take a few tries to beat on your first playthrough. Number 18, we have my personal favourite boss fight, which is the Howling Aces. The boss itself is so much fun, I believe. The first phase is just you fighting a big dog that can come to shoot down bones or yarn balls. The second phase is one of the easiest in the game, and all you do is shoot out the little dogs that shoot out letters which spell out the word bow. The final phase is so much fun as you get rotated around, which also changes your controls, which makes it a touch tricky. There's also a secret phase which happens if you make the smoke from the dogs in the second phase go grey for all of them at once, which unfortunately skips the final phase, which in my opinion makes it less fun. Number 17, we have Glumstone the Giant. Now some people may disagree with this placing, but I believe that is truly not that hard compared to some of the other ones later on. The first phase has some gnomes throwing gold nuggets up from below you. On top of this, Glumstone can occasionally open up his mouth for another attack where he shoots out what I believe is poison. On the second phase, you fight 2 puppets, one being King Dice and the other being the Devil. This, of course, is a reference to Inkwell Hell being the final world that you tackle. After that, Glumstone has the urge to swallow you, and then you attack his uvula while jumping across crocodile skulls. That being said, he's still one of the easier DLC bosses. 16, we have Captain Brinybeard. I hear people say that this boss is easily in the top 5 hardest. It's not actually that hard. If you're using Miss Chance, that is. He starts off by just shooting pink and yellow projectiles while a barrel chases you down, which he does for the entire fight. He then proceeds to call on some sea animals that are trying to kill you, but before the final phase, the ship begins to shoot cannonballs out of his mouth. After that, the ship throws Brinybeard and starts to shoot fiery bullets out of its uvula. He also shoots a giant laser that you must duck behind, and not to mention, you can actually parry the giant laser. But the biggest problem in the face is the barrel, which is still very easy to avoid. 15, we have the Moonshine Mob. The fight starts off with a giant spider that can call on tiny flies that cover a certain area of the stage. You can also spawn in bombs that explode if you touch them. After that, you get to the second phase with a giant music box that shoots out beams which rotate clockwise or anti-clockwise. With the final phase, you are fighting a giant anteater which sticks out his tongue to cover up a third of the stage. He also picks up what I believe to be sugar balls that have other ants in it. This is relatively easier to avoid. Once you beat it, you are shown a fake knockout screen and then must fight the boss. The phase, however, is very short. Also, the reason the fight is called Bootlegger Boogie is because they use old aspects that they never use throughout the normal game. 14, we have Baroness von Bonbon. This is one of the weirder bosses in the game, where the whole beginning is RNG based. You fight 3 different mini-bosses which are all random. Some of the ones you can fight are the Jawbreaker, the Waffle, the Gumball Man, and the Cupcake. When you fight 3 of these guys, then you can fight Baroness, which is honestly pretty easy. The fight consists of her throwing a head at you which follows you around, whilst occasionally a peppermint rolls across the bottom of the screen, which makes this fight pretty hard. Then we have Werner Werman. Okay, I know this guy is very easy for a World 3 boss fight, but that being said, he still is harder than Baroness von Bonbon. At the beginning, he shoots out cherry bombs or launches junk at you. When you beat that part, you then go on to the second phase where bottle caps pop out of the left and right sides of the screen. On top of that, Werner begins to shoot fire out of his tank. When you beat that phase, you go on to the final phase where Werner is eaten by a cat, and then the cat starts sticking his paw out from the left side or the right side of the screen, which in turn makes boards fall from the top of the screen. You can also summon Mice's Ghost, which can shoot balls onto you and will split into two smaller projectiles when it hits the floor. But when you beat him, you get to see that Werner was actually controlling the cat the whole time. 12, we have Phantom Express. The first phase has a ghost shooting out eyes from the palm of his hand. The second phase has a skeleton that slams his hand down on 2/3 of the stage. The third phase has these weird AirPod looking things that spew fire whilst ghosts come in from the top of the screen. The final phase has the train turn into a horse which gallops across the screen. You can't hurt it unless you parry the light at the end of its tail. This boss serves as quite a good warm-up, as it is the final boss you fight before Inkwell Hell. For 11, we have Beppy the Clown. This boss isn't honestly too difficult in my opinion. The first phase has Beppy in a car that charges at you. When you defeat him, he turns into a giant balloon whilst balloon dogs chase you down. Then he hops on a horse. Then he sends out horseshoes in different patterns. Once you beat him, you get the final phase where he turns into a carousel which rotates at the top of the screen. He occasionally spits out penguins, which for some reason shoot out baseballs. 10, we have Digimir the Grey. His first phase has many different attacks, some of them being swords, catch, and a bunch of treasures. After that phase, you need to maneuver through a set of pillars before reaching the third phase where he turns into a sarcophagus. This phase is really easy if you just shoot and stay at the far left of the screen. He then turns into a puppet that looks like Mugman who shoots with finger guns whilst a spinning genie hat occasionally shoots out bullets in a rose-like formation. The final phase has Digimir taking up half the screen whilst the Bill Cipher-looking pyramids spin around the stage and occasionally shoot out a beam heading in 4 directions. This boss also has a secret phase where if you're small heading into the final puppet phase, it skips that phase but makes the final phase a lot harder. Getting into the hard ones. At number 9 we have Mortimer Freeze. His first phase is just him throwing down ice dudes while occasionally making cars follow you. After that you go into the second phase where he turns into a freak and occasionally leaps across the screen in an attempt to hit you. He also sends out popsicles and makes spikes rise from the floor. On the final phase he turns into a snowflake and can shoot out an eye which shoots lasers out in 2 directions, whilst he also summons buckets that split into 3 different projectiles. With practice, this boss is not too hard, but it did make me very angry, so I believe it deserves this spot on the list. Number 8, we have Cala Maria. Her first phase is definitely the hardest, as she has several different attacks you need to get used to, like ghosts that dart at you, a fire-breathing fish, a fish that shoots out electric dolphins, a turtle that shoots out a bomb, a seahorse that's annoying because it pushes you upwards, pufferfish running from the bottom to the top. All of this is just in the first phase. The rest of the fight is a lot easier, however. The second phase has Cala Maria turning into Medusa and turning you to stone whilst bullet hell is happening, which makes it very likely to get hit. The final phase has her head in a narrow path where there are spikes that hurt you and a bubble that chases you down. On top of this, she can also turn you to stone, which means no escape if you're about to hit a spike wall. At number 7, we have Rumour Honeybottoms. The first phase has you fighting a postman bee that lays down bombs whilst other worker bees get in your way. The second phase has you shooting honeybombs while she summons bullet bills, triangles that shoot on all 3 corners, or a circle that chases you. The final phase has her turn into a freaking plane whilst fists rotate around you. I originally thought that the fists chase you, but I later realised that they just go around the screen in a pattern. Now I know people don't agree on this, but I definitely had a hard time beating Rumour because of the platforming you need to do simultaneously.
Hi, I'm the editor, and I'm going to be taking over for a second because I believe I'm quite devilish myself. At number 6, we have the devil himself. This boss has several attacks and each of them are hard to avoid, so I'll just say a few of them. The first phase has you avoiding many things, like him turning into a goat, him becoming a dragon, him spawning things with this pitchfork, and more. The second phase has you jump through a suspicious hole in the ground, where you then see his head the size of the stage. His hitbox is his eyes, which honestly makes the fight easier because of how big they are. The next phase, he starts crying and summoning his henchmen, which throw skulls at you whilst weird bugs fly down from the top of the screen. The last phase is the easiest of all, because all you need to do is jump around the chips as they fall from above. However, I wish this phase was longer because I really enjoyed it.
You get into this recording. Anyways, we're getting into the top 5 now. At number 5, we have Chef Saltbaker. He has one of the most brutal first phases ever. You need mad skills to get out of it hitless. He gets up ingredients, which then turn into obstacles that you must avoid, like sugar cubes, limes, cookies, and strawberries. After all that nonsense, you go into a phase that's not so brutal. You basically are shooting these salt shakers as they later hit Chef Saltbaker in the face, all whilst leaves fall down, as well as Saltbaker sneezing. The third phase is the easiest, as all you do is shoot out the dancing salt dudes whilst the saw is moving around to get you. The final phase, Chef Saltbreaker, turns into a heart which is parryable, which is whilst you do all the platforming trying not to be hit. It may first sound easy, but it's really tricky. Number 4, we have Esther Winchester. Her first phase has a shootout snake oil that then turns it back around to try hitting you again, whilst animals can shoot out obstacles your way. She also can lasso a cactus, but that's pretty easy to avoid. The second phase has her sucking up money and then turning them into volts that shoot out more money. She then accidentally sucks herself up and it turns into a sausage, which shoots out beef, whilst other hot dogs can shoot out sausage links that damage you. The final phase has her turn into a tin can that shoots out sausage links that cross over each other whilst peppers cover the screen. This boss was very hard to beat for me, which is why it's so high on the list. We have Wally Wobbles. His first phase has him shooting out eggs that split into 3 ways, as well as bullet bill fingers, while some small birds fly at the top of the bottom of the screen. His next phase is a bullet hell with his feathers covering up the screen. His third phase has his son shooting at you with his toy pistol whilst eggs rotate around him and act as a barrier. The final phase has Wally being taken to the hospital while smaller birds shoot out pills that split in half whilst his heart occasionally shoots out bullets at you. I hate this fight, and it's probably one of my least favourites purely because of how long it is. 2. We have Grim Matchstick, a fire-breathing dragon that strikes terror to anybody's face. He shoots out laser from his eyes and fireballs on top of that. You need to constantly be jumping from cloud to cloud. The second phase has him being on a really strange angle, which makes him hard to hit unless you're using the lobber, whilst little fire guys jump up from the bottom of the screen. The final phase has him shoot out fireballs that split into 4 separate bullets that makes it harder to stay alive if you hit him. He also does a fire-breathing attack, which just gets you more damaging. And the only reason this boss is number 1 is because I now find this boss easier than he was when I first beat him. You all know who he is. He strikes terror to even the bravest of people. His name is Dr. Cow's robot. His first phase has you destroy separate parts of his body, which actually makes the fight harder or easier depending on what you take out first. That's why I like getting them each on very low HP before I take them all out in one clean stroke. The second phase has him fly across the top and bottom of the screen whilst bombs chase you down. The final phase has you dodging bullet hell whilst avoiding electric fences that stop you from getting past easily, which can make you die. And on top of that, the developers had the audacity to add foreground objects, which can make it hard to see what's ahead of you. They also made the red bullets hard to notice, with the entire stage being red. This boss is just annoying, but with that being said, he's still one of my favourite bosses. There it is, all Cuphead bosses ranked. I hope you agree with the placings on this list, as the script took me around 5 hours to finish. All that being said, I really hope you enjoyed this video and maybe even like and subscribe. You should also share this video with a friend so that I can get a milestone of 100 subscribers. We're still pretty far away as the time I'm making this, but if you could do it, I'd be very impressed. So, bye.
I'm Mr. King Dice. I'm the gamest in the land. I never play nice. I'm the devil's right-hand man. I can't let you pass, 'cause you ain't done everything. Bring me those contracts, come on, bring 'em to the king.